Galactic war was at its peak, and the Dominion had the upper hand. Their fleets were massive, their weapons unmatched, and their soldiers feared across the stars. The Coalition, a fragile alliance of weaker species, was on the brink of collapse. On the edge of the battlefield, a small Coalition fleet desperately tried to retreat, their ships damaged, their weapons depleted. The Dominion's warships surrounded them like hungry beasts, their energy cannons charging for the final strike. The battle was all but over. Then, without warning, the Dominion sensors picked up an anomaly. A single warship had entered the battlefield from deep space. It had no Coalition markings, no identifiable signal, just a dark, metallic hull that absorbed radar like a void in space. The Dominion commander smirked. "One more ship to destroy," he muttered. His crew laughed. But then, something strange happened. The ship didn't respond to hails, didn't slow down. It just kept moving forward, directly toward the Dominion fleet, like a predator locking onto its prey. The Dominion's flagship scanned the vessel, expecting to find outdated technology, weak defenses, something easy to crush. But the readings made no sense. The ship's armor was unidentifiable. It had no visible energy shields, no standard weapon systems, just a dark, cold exterior that revealed nothing. The Dominion fleet opened fire, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts and laser strikes. The energy beams should have melted through the hull like a knife through soft metal. Instead, the attack simply vanished upon impact, as if the ship wasn't even there. For the first time, the Dominion commanders hesitated. Their enemy had no shields, no countermeasures, yet their most powerful weapons were useless. Before they could react, the unknown warship Retaliated.it didn't fire plasma or lasers. Instead, it launched a single kinetic projectile, a glowing spear of metal traveling at impossible speed. The Dominion's largest battleship, a behemoth that had crushed entire armadas, took the hit directly to its hull. There was no explosion, no fiery blast, just instant destruction. The ship split apart like it had been struck by a god's hammer, torn in half as its pieces scattered into space. The battlefield went silent. Dominion commanders stared in horror. One shot had destroyed their mightiest warship. Panic spread like wildfire. Orders were shouted, fleets repositioned, but it was too late. The unknown warship accelerated, moving faster than anything should be able to in combat. It weaved between Dominion cruisers with mechanical precision, its hull untouched by enemy fire. More kinetic rounds were fired, each one tearing through ships as if they were made of paper. The once mighty Dominion fleet was being reduced to wreckage in mere minutes. Coalition forces, battered and exhausted, watched in stunned silence. They had called for reinforcements, expecting a few support ships, maybe a small rescue fleet. Instead, they had received this. The name of the warship finally appeared on their scanners. HSS, Wrath of Terra. Some of the older Coalition officers gasped. That name was a legend, a ghost story whispered among warriors. Humanity, a species once dismissed as too reckless and warlike, had retreated into deep space centuries ago, vanishing without a trace. No one knew why. Some said they had gone extinct. Others believed they were hiding, waiting. Now, it seemed the stories were true, and humanity had returned. The Dominion's high command, watching from a distant command station, sent a desperate transmission. Unknown vessel, identify yourself. We demand negotiations. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, a single message came through, spoken in a calm, almost mechanical voice. You were warned. Now you will learn why humanity was left alone. Before the Dominion could react, the Wrath of Terra unleashed its final weapon. A gravitational implosion device, a weapon so advanced that no known species had dared to develop it. The Dominion's last remaining dreadnought, a ship large enough to house millions, was suddenly crushed into itself, vanishing into a swirling void of darkness. The surrounding ships were pulled in, their hulls cracking like dry leaves before they too disappeared. The few Dominion ships that remained turned and fled. They didn't fight back. They didn't try to regroup. They ran, their commanders too terrified to do anything else. The Wrath of Terra didn't pursue. It simply hovered in the wreckage of the battlefield, its mission complete. The coalition forces hesitated, wondering if they should hail the ship, thank their mysterious savior. But before they could decide, the warship turned and accelerated, vanishing into the depths of space without another word. It left no trace behind, no explanation, just the wreckage of a Dominion fleet and a message that would haunt the galaxy forever. Humanity had returned, and the war would never be the same again. The battle was almost over. The Dominion fleet, vast and merciless, had surrounded the last of the coalition ships. Explosions ripped through the darkness, bright flashes of destruction marking the end of another dying vessel. The Dominion commander, Grand Admiral Vorkath, watched from his flagship, a cruel smile on his face. The coalition had fought bravely, but bravery did not win wars, power did. And the Dominion had more power than any species in the galaxy. His fleet was unstoppable, his warships armed with the most advanced technology ever created. It was only a matter of minutes before the final coalition ship was erased from existence. Then suddenly, the sensors on every Dominion vessel lit up with an alert. An unknown object had entered the battlefield. At first, it appeared to be just another piece of debris drifting in from the wreckage, but the readings didn't match. It wasn't wreckage. It was moving, fast, and it was big. The unknown ship cut through the darkness like a shadow, silent and massive. It had no transponder signal, no visible insignia, and no communication link. Just a dark metallic hull that seemed to absorb the light around it. Vorkath narrowed his eyes, irritated by the distraction. "Scan it," he ordered. His officers worked quickly, but the results made no sense. The ship's hull was unreadable. It had no traditional shields, no energy emissions, nothing that matched known warship classifications. It was like scanning a void. One of the Dominion captains scoffed. "Primitive stealth technology," he muttered. "A last-ditch effort from the coalition." The other officers laughed in agreement. The ship was alone. Whatever it was, it posed no real threat. "Destroy it," Vorkath commanded. Immediately, the Dominion fleet opened fire. Streams of plasma bolts and high-energy lasers rained down on the mysterious warship. The attacks should have melted through its hull in seconds, tearing it apart like paper. But something was wrong. The weapons didn't seem to hit. No explosions, no impact, no visible effect. It was as if the ship wasn't even there. The laughter on the Dominion bridge faded. Officers glanced at each other, confusion turning to unease. "Direct hit confirmed," one of them reported. But, no damage." Vorkath clenched his jaw. That was impossible. "Fire again," he snapped. The Dominion fleet unleashed another deadly barrage, this time doubling their firepower. But the result was the same. No effect. The warship continued moving forward, slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Then, without warning, it retaliated. There was no traditional weapon fire, no bright energy beams, no missile launches. Instead, a single kinetic projectile shot out from the unknown vessel, a small, unremarkable slug of metal. It moved at impossible speed, cutting through the void like a comet. It struck the Dominion's largest battleship. There was no explosion, no fiery destruction, just pure force. The battleship, a vessel the size of a city, shattered instantly, breaking apart like glass. The silence that followed was deafening. Every Dominion officer on the bridge froze, their faces pale with shock. One single shot had destroyed one of their most powerful warships. It wasn't possible. It shouldn't have been possible. And yet, the wreckage drifting in space told the truth. Fear settled into the Dominion fleet like a sickness. This wasn't just an unknown ship. It was something far worse. Before anyone could react, the warship moved. It accelerated with unnatural speed, weaving through the Dominion formation with terrifying precision. More kinetic rounds fired, and with each shot, another Dominion vessel was erased from existence. Their strongest shields meant nothing. Their advanced technology was useless. The Dominion fleet, once an unbreakable force, was being hunted. Vorkath's hands trembled as he gripped the armrests of his command chair. "Retreat," he finally whispered. The word felt like poison in his mouth, but there was no other option. They had to escape. "All ships, retreat," he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. The remaining Dominion warships turned, engines burning bright as they attempted to flee. But the warship was faster. It moved like a ghost, striking with unrelenting precision. One by one, the Dominion vessels fell. On the other side of the battlefield, the battered Coalition fleet watched in stunned silence. They had been seconds away from annihilation, and now they were witnessing something unbelievable. One ship, one single warship, was tearing through the Dominion like they were nothing. The name of the vessel finally appeared on their scanners: HFY Wrath of Terra. A whisper spread among the Coalition officers. They had heard the name before. A legend. A ghost story. Humanity had vanished from galactic affairs centuries ago, retreating into deep space, leaving behind only rumors. No one knew why. Some said they had gone extinct. Others believed they had chosen isolation. But now there was no doubt. Humanity had returned. And they had not been idle. The Dominion's last remaining dreadnought. The unknown warship stopped moving, hovering like a predator savoring the last moments before a kill. A single message was transmitted across all frequencies, a cold, mechanical voice that sent shivers down every spine. "You were warned. Now you will learn why humanity was left alone." And then the Wrath of Terra fired its final shot. The Dominion flagship didn't explode. It didn't break apart. Instead, it simply vanished, consumed by a gravitational anomaly unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And just like that, the battle was over. The Dominion fleet was gone. The Coalition, once on the edge of extinction, had been saved. But there was no celebration. Only silence. The warship didn't stay. It didn't send a message, didn't claim victory. It simply turned and disappeared into the void, vanishing as mysteriously as it had arrived. It left no trace, no explanation. Only wreckage and fear. The galaxy had learned something that day, something terrifying. Humanity had not been destroyed. They had not been defeated. They had simply been waiting. And now they were back. The battlefield was a graveyard of burning metal and broken ships. The Dominion's fleet, vast and merciless, loomed over the remaining Coalition vessels, ready to deliver the final blow. The Dominion commanders stood on their massive warships, confident, victorious, and amused. This war had been too easy. The Coalition's forces had been weak, disorganized, and completely outmatched. And now, as the last of their ships struggled to escape, the Dominion prepared to finish what they had started. But then, an anomaly appeared on their sensors, a single small warship emerging from deep space, moving straight toward the battlefield. The Dominion officers burst into laughter. A human ship. A relic from a species long considered insignificant. Humanity had stayed out of the war, retreating into the shadows, avoiding conflict. And now, they dared to send a lone ship against the most powerful armada in the galaxy? It was pathetic. "Target it and destroy it," one of the Dominion commanders ordered, smirking. "This will be over in seconds." The Dominion warships locked onto the human vessel, scanning its systems. No advanced shielding, no energy-based weaponry, no high-speed maneuvering thrusters. Just outdated armor, primitive propulsion, and what looked like an ancient kinetic weapon system. The laughter grew louder. This ship wasn't even a threat. It was a joke. The Dominion's main battleship, the Doombringer, led the assault. It was a fortress in space, a massive dreadnought that had crushed entire fleets with ease. Its plasma cannons powered up, ready to reduce the human ship to dust. The order was given. A wave of energy blasts shot through the void, striking the human vessel dead center. But something was wrong. There was no explosion. No damage. The human ship remained intact, its dark metallic hull absorbing the impact like a stone in a storm. The laughter faded. Confusion spread through the Dominion's ranks. "That's impossible," one officer muttered, checking the readings again. "It should be destroyed." But before anyone could understand what had happened, the human ship retaliated. It didn't fire plasma, didn't unleash lasers, didn't use any known advanced weaponry. Instead, a single kinetic projectile was launched. A solid slug of metal, traveling at an unimaginable speed, faster than anything the Dominion had ever seen. It struck the Doombringer directly at its core. For a second, there was silence. Then, in an instant, the Dominion's most powerful warship split apart, torn in two as if it had been struck by the fist of a god. There was no explosion, no bright fireball, just pure destruction. The Doombringer was gone. Millions of tons of metal, reduced to nothing in the blink of an eye. The Dominion fleet froze. The commanders who had been laughing just moments ago now stood in stunned silence, their faces pale with horror. One single shot had destroyed their greatest warship. How? It was impossible. Panic spread through the Dominion fleet. Orders were shouted, ships repositioned, but it was too late. The human warship moved with terrifying precision, weaving through their formations like a ghost. More projectiles were fired. More ships fell. Each shot was lethal, unstoppable. The Dominion's weapons were useless, their shields ineffective. Nothing could stop this nightmare. The commanders, once so confident in their superiority, now begged for answers. "What is that ship?" one of them cried. "Where did it come from?" But there were no answers. Only fear. The Dominion had fought countless species, crushed countless civilizations, but they had never seen anything like this. The human vessel didn't just fight, it hunted. It struck with surgical accuracy, dismantling the Dominion fleet piece by piece. The coalition forces, battered and broken, could only watch in awe. They had expected to die. They had prepared for defeat. And yet, here they were, witnessing the impossible. The name of the warship finally appeared on their scanners. HFY Wrath of Terra. A legend. A myth. Humanity had stayed silent for centuries, hidden away in the depths of space. The other species had assumed they were weak, that they had chosen exile out of fear. But the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity had not been avoiding war. They had been preparing for it. And now they had returned. The Dominion's fleet, once the unstoppable force of the galaxy, was in full retreat. The proud warriors of the Dominion, known for their brutality and arrogance, were running. But they couldn't run fast enough. The Wrath of Terra continued its assault, wiping out ship after ship. The final Dominion dreadnought, a towering behemoth bristling with weapons, sent out a desperate transmission. "We surrender," the commander pleaded. The signal cut off. A final kinetic round had struck, reducing the ship to dust. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, the human warship stopped. It hovered for a moment, scanning the wreckage, as if ensuring that its work was complete. The battlefield, once filled with chaos and destruction, was now eerily quiet. The Dominion fleet was gone. Without a word, without a single message, the Wrath of Terra turned and vanished into the darkness of space, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and fear. The survivors of the battle, both Dominion and Coalition, would speak of this day for generations. The day humanity returned. The day the galaxy realized its mistake. They had laughed at the primitive human ship. But now there was no laughter. Only terror. The battlefield was a storm of fire and metal, burning wreckage, drifting like the corpses of fallen giants. The Dominion fleet had expected an easy victory, but now fear gripped every officer, every soldier. The Wrath of Terra moved through the chaos like a phantom, untouched, unstoppable. Dominion warships fired desperately, unleashing plasma cannons, missile barrages, and high-energy beams, but nothing could land a hit. The ship weaved through the carnage with unnatural precision, its dark hull almost disappearing into the void. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. No transponder signals, no communication, no demands for surrender. Just cold, ruthless efficiency. The Dominion commanders shouted frantic orders, voices shaking with panic. Surround it. Cut off its escape. But there was no escape route to cut off. The Wrath of Terra was not running, it was hunting. A squadron of Dominion destroyers formed a defensive wall, their weapons synchronized, tracking every movement of the human warship. They opened fire in perfect unison, flooding space with enough firepower to reduce a moon to rubble. For a moment, it seemed like no ship could survive such an onslaught. But then, in a blur of motion, the Wrath of Terra twisted mid-flight, slipping between the blasts with inhuman grace. It darted forward, closing the distance before the Dominion captains could react. A single kinetic slug fired. The lead destroyer didn't explode, it simply ceased to exist, split in half with terrifying precision. The remaining ships tried to retreat, but the Wrath of Terra was already among them. Another shot. Another ship shattered. The survivors turned and fled, their commanders screaming for reinforcements. But no reinforcements would arrive in time. On the Dominion's command ship, Grand Admiral Vorkath stood frozen, his hands gripping the control panel so tightly his claws dug into the metal. This was impossible. The Dominion had conquered countless civilizations. They had faced the strongest fleets in the galaxy and crushed them with overwhelming force. And yet, here they were, being torn apart by a single ship. "What are we fighting?" one of his officers whispered, his voice barely audible. Vorkath had no answer. The scanners provided nothing. No weaknesses, no energy emissions, no technology they could understand. It was as if the Wrath of Terra was beyond science itself. "Fire the annihilation cannons," he ordered, his voice shaking with rage. The command was given, and the Dominion's most powerful weapons charged, glowing with the energy of a dying star. If the human ship survived this, then it truly wasn't of this world. The Wrath of Terra stopped moving. It hovered in the darkness, facing the Dominion fleet as if challenging them to do their worst. The cannons fired. A blinding wave of destruction surged forward, enough power to vaporize a planet. The light consumed everything, swallowing the ship whole. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. Then, as the glow faded, the impossible happened. The Wrath of Terra remained. Untouched. Unharmed. It hadn't even moved. The Dominion fleet, once proud and unbreakable, now faced a horror beyond their understanding. The Wrath of Terra retaliated. It didn't fire in anger. It didn't fire in desperation. It fired with cold, calculated precision. Another round was launched, and another Dominion warship crumbled. Then another. And another. Panic spread like wildfire. Dominion soldiers abandoned their posts. Captains issued desperate retreat orders. Some refused to fight, paralyzed by the sheer terror of what they were witnessing. This wasn't war. This was extermination. The Wrath of Terra advanced through the wreckage, methodical and relentless. It dodged every attack, destroyed every target, and never slowed. It was like fighting a ghost, a specter of death that no Dominion weapon could touch. Their fleet, once the most feared in the galaxy, was being torn apart like it was nothing. Across the battlefield, the shattered remains of the Coalition fleet watched in stunned silence. They had expected to die. They had prepared for extinction. But now, they saw something else: hope. The name of the warship finally appeared on their scanners, and whispers spread among the survivors. Wrath of Terra. The name was legend. Humanity had disappeared from galactic affairs long ago, retreating into deep space, refusing to join the wars that shaped the cosmos. The other species had mocked them, calling them cowards, believing they had fled because they were weak. But now, it was clear. Humanity had not been running. They had been waiting. And now, they had returned. The Dominion fleet, broken and desperate, turned to flee. They no longer cared for victory, only survival. But the Wrath of Terra had other plans. It moved faster than should have been possible, cutting through their formation, striking down any ship that tried to escape. The final Dominion dreadnought, a towering fortress of steel and firepower, sent out a transmission. "We surrender," the commander begged. "Please, we surrender." But the wrath of Terra did not respond. It did not negotiate. It did not ask for terms. It simply fired one last time. The dreadnought vanished, swallowed by an impact that defied physics itself. And then it was over. The Dominion fleet was gone. The wrath of Terra did not linger. It did not claim victory. It did not offer explanations. It simply turned and vanished into the darkness, disappearing as suddenly as it had arrived. The galaxy would never forget this day. The day humanity returned. The day the Dominion learned fear. The Dominion had never known fear. For centuries, they had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, crushing every species that dared to resist. Their fleets were vast, their armies unstoppable. They were the undisputed masters of war. But now, as the last remnants of their once mighty armada drifted through space like broken carcasses, fear was all they had left. The wrath of Terra loomed before them, silent and merciless. It had come from nowhere, a ghost of humanity's forgotten past, and in a matter of hours, it had reduced the Dominion's greatest warships to dust. What was once the hunter had become the hunted. The Dominion High Command, once so proud, now cowered in their final stronghold, sending desperate transmissions across the stars. "We surrender," their leaders pleaded. "We beg for peace. The war is over." But the only reply they received chilled them to their core. A single message, cold and final. "You started this war. We will end it." Terror gripped the Dominion as the wrath of Terra moved forward. There was no response from the human ship, no negotiation, no demands. It simply advanced, its weapons primed, its intent clear. The Dominion had spent decades conquering weaker species, expecting them to bow in submission. But humanity was different. They had not fought for territory. They had not fought for power. They had fought for vengeance. The Dominion had believed the humans to be extinct, wiped out in the first wave of their galactic expansion. No one had heard from Earth in over a century, and yet, here they were, not just alive, but evolved into something far deadlier. The wrath of Terra was no ordinary warship. It was a relic of an ancient, forgotten war. A war humanity had never forgiven. And now, they had returned to finish it. Across the last Dominion-controlled sector, their forces scrambled to escape. Frantic orders were sent to abandon military posts, to evacuate entire planets. High-ranking officials fled to the deepest corners of the galaxy, hoping to disappear before the wrath of mankind found them. But it was useless. The wrath of Terra moved with terrifying precision, striking without warning, appearing in system after system, wiping out every last remnant of Dominion power. There was no pattern to its attacks, no political targets, no strategic invasions. It didn't conquer planets or take prisoners. It simply annihilated. Every fleet sent to stop it vanished without a trace. Every base left standing was reduced to rubble before a distress signal could be sent. The Dominion's greatest commanders, warriors who had once led countless campaigns of destruction, found themselves helpless, watching as everything they had built was erased from existence. The High Council of the Dominion, the supreme rulers who had once dictated the fate of entire civilizations, gathered in their last hidden fortress, a planet-sized station buried deep within an uncharted nebula. They had thought themselves safe, believing no enemy could ever find them. But the moment they received humanity's final message, they knew the truth. There was nowhere left to run. The wrath of Terra had found them. Alarms blared as the station's sensors detected the ship emerging from hyperspace. It didn't come with an armada. It didn't need one. The Dominion's finest defenses, shields capable of withstanding a supernova, activated instantly. Thousands of automated turrets locked onto the human vessel. The last of the Dominion's warships formed a desperate blockade, willing to give their lives for their masters. But deep down, everyone knew. It wouldn't be enough. The wrath of Terra did not slow down. It did not hesitate. It fired. A single projectile, moving faster than any Dominion technology could track, struck the station's shield generator. In an instant, the fortress that had stood for centuries, the unbreakable heart of the Dominion, was exposed. The blockade opened fire, sending everything they had at the human warship. Explosions filled the void, lighting up space in a storm of destruction. But when the smoke cleared, the wrath of Terra was still there. Unharmed. Unstoppable. One by one, the last defenders of the Dominion fell. The warships that had once led countless conquests were reduced to drifting wreckage. The great fortress, the last refuge of the Dominion's rulers, now stood alone. Inside, the High Council watched in silence, their arrogance shattered, their power meaningless. They had ordered the extinction of humanity all those years ago. They had celebrated their victory, laughed at the weakness of their enemies. And now, they were the ones being erased. A final message was sent. Please, no more death. We surrender. Spare us. But humanity had already answered. You started this war. We will end it. The wrath of Terra unleashed its final attack. The kinetic round tore through the station's core, splitting it apart in a single, earth-shattering impact. The High Council, the architects of the Dominion's empire, were wiped out in an instant. And just like that, the war was over. The galaxy would never forget what had happened. The Dominion, once the most feared force in existence, had been destroyed. And humanity had returned not as conquerors, not as diplomats, but as executioners. The wrath of Terra did not linger. It did not claim victory. It simply vanished into the void, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and whispers. No one knew where it had come from. No one knew if there were more like it. But one thing was certain. The days of the Dominion were over. And the galaxy would never dare to challenge humanity again. The battlefield was silent. What was once the pride of the Dominion, an armada strong enough to shatter planets, now drifted in ruins. The once mighty warships lay broken, their shattered hulls glowing dimly in the fading embers of destruction. The last echoes of battle faded into the endless void, leaving only the wreckage and the whispers of those who had survived. And at the heart of it all, motionless, like a specter watching over the graveyard it had created, was the wrath of Terra. It had come without warning. It had destroyed without mercy. And now it simply remained, as if contemplating its next move. The coalition survivors, battered and speechless, stared at the massive vessel in awe and fear. They had never seen anything like it, silent, invincible, beyond their understanding. On the Dominion's final stronghold, where the last high-ranking officers had gathered to witness the battle, a terrible realization spread like poison. They had believed humanity to be weak, a primitive species that had disappeared long ago. But they had been wrong. Humanity had not been exterminated. They had not been conquered. They had been waiting. Waiting for the right moment to return. Waiting for the right moment to remind the galaxy of who they truly were. The wrath of Terra had answered that question in fire and blood. It had not come for negotiations, nor had it come to reclaim lost territory. It had come to deliver a message, one that no Dominion officer would ever forget: humanity was never weak. Panic rippled through the few remaining Dominion ships that had survived the massacre. Their captains sent desperate signals into the void, warning any who would listen. Do not engage the human warship. Do not provoke them. Retreat and do not look back. The Dominion had believed themselves to be the ultimate power in the galaxy, the supreme force that could not be challenged. That belief had been shattered. Every fleet they had sent against the wrath of Terra had been wiped out. Every strategy they had used had failed. The warship did not fight like any other vessel. It moved like a ghost, dodging every attack, cutting through their defenses with brutal precision. It had no weakness, no hesitation, no fear. It was as if humanity had been reborn, not as a nation, but as a force of nature. And then, without a word, without a signal, the wrath of Terra turned away. The massive warship, dark and imposing, began moving toward the edge of the battlefield. No one knew what it was doing. The surviving coalition forces hesitated, afraid to follow, afraid to even speak. The Dominion remnants, too broken to resist, simply watched in horror. Then, in an instant, the ship was gone. It did not jump to hyperspace in a traditional way. It did not leave behind any trace of energy, no signal, no route to track. One moment it was there, and the next it had vanished, as if it had never existed at all. The silence that followed was suffocating. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. The Dominion, once the most feared empire in existence, had been utterly crushed in a single night. The Coalition, who had been moments away from annihilation, had been saved by something they did not understand. But the most terrifying part of all was the mystery that now hung over every species in the universe. Where had humanity been all these years? Where had they built a warship like that?